Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Matthews, since the minister didn't know, can you at least tell this committee what lapsed funding is?
I can tell you across the government last fiscal was around 8% lower than usual or previous years. I should mention for defense, they have special authorities around carrying forward money because of the complexity of their projects. And, you know, they only pay when they get the bills from the suppliers. So this bleeds into one of your previous questions about the money in supplementary estimates B. There's a mix in there of money that was in the previous year that has come forward again as unspent, and that's for River-class destroyers as well as F-35. There's also some new money for drones and some base infrastructure and some training and things like that. So it's a combination in there.
Can you clarify if any of that counts towards the $1.1 billion in new spending that the minister was talking about?
The 1.1 is what is in these estimates, and as I just mentioned, it is a mix of things that you may have seen or would have seen in previous year's estimates that was not spent. So it comes into this year's, but it has to be re-voted on by Parliament, so that's why it's there, as well as new money.
Okay, so it's not fully new money. It's some new money, but it's also some of the...
Right, and when you're voting money for projects like national defense, they're so big that when you do see some slippage, it will roll over from one year to the next, and they are very difficult projects at times to forecast the cash flow on. So you err on the side of caution because you're not allowed to overspend. So it's natural for defense to see this kind of movement.
With regards to Canada Post, yeah, the $1 billion plus loan that was sent to them. I mean, there is a clause in the Canada Post Act that says repayment will be taken from annual revenue insofar as such revenue is sufficient. But, I mean, they posted another record loss. We're never getting that money back, are we?
So the loan is repayable until there's a decision taken that says it's not. It is repayable. And whether they will need additional funds, you know, they now have a labor agreement, as you mentioned, or was mentioned by the member, Mr. Chair. How they will rebound in terms of picking back up business that may have been lost during the rotating strikes, that will have a heavy influence in their cash flows going forward. So I'm sure they're keeping a close eye on that.
The section, I think it's section 31 of the Act also allows the Minister of Finance, which by extension through the Treasury Board, to send money to Canada Post. Is there an outstanding request for more funding, bailout funding, for lack of a better term, for Canada Post?
Mr. Chair, there's nothing on my office in terms of a request for additional funding, but the normal flow would be Canada Post through the Minister of PSPC over to Finance. Once the Minister of Finance, or if the Minister of Finance is on side with additional funding, it would then come to Treasury Board Secretariat at that time.
Are you able to write a clause in there that would essentially override that section 32 to make sure that the taxpayer is made whole as a condition within a set period of time, or does that section 32 prohibit you from being able to make sure that taxpayers are made whole?
Mr. Chair, the specifics on that one, I say in general, you can't override legislation with policy or agreements. I don't know this act in detail, but that would be a decision for the Minister of Finance to take when deciding what conditions to put on any funding for Canada Post.
Okay. Yeah, there's reports that Canada Post has said it's going to need another loan. I think $500 million. So I guess keep your eyes open for that going forward. When it comes to contracts, I mean, you said earlier that you don't review all the contracts before money gets sent out. But do you not find it alarming that you would get requests for large sums of money only to find out that legal hasn't read the entire contract, minister hasn't read the entire contract before it comes to you? Does that not alarm you as somebody who is as part of the process flow to either approve or not approve money before it goes out the door?
So I think there are people who have read the contract. I guarantee you there are lawyers who have read the contract inside the Government of Canada, etc. I don't know the timing, and I can't recall the timing of the Stellantis contract in terms of the current minister and the current deputy. I'm not even sure if they were present at the time that it was signed. The role for Treasury Board Secretariat is around approving the terms and conditions, and as long as a program respects the terms and conditions that were set out and approved by the government, then it is off to the responsible minister to and the department to fulfill those conditions.
Right, but we heard on Tuesday. Oh, thanks.
Mr. Gasparo?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service. Overall, how does the TPS ensure that our new spending not only meets immediate needs, but also positions Canada as a leader in attracting global investment? Like, what's some of the thought that's put into it?
So the flow, Mr. Chair, will be that when you see some new initiatives for investment approved in the budget, we're going to set aside tax measures, but new programs where there is actually dollars being spent. If they are new programs, they will come to Treasury Board Secretariat for approval. Those programs would include their objectives, how they plan to attain them, their performance measures, and a cash flow. And so Treasury Board Secretariat would be working with the responsible department to make sure that their performance measures and their approach meet the intent of the government.
So the Treasury Board Secretariat departmental results show that 91% of a sample of government programs included suitable measures for tracking performance, including and informing decision-making. I think that's pretty impressive. I'm glad to see the department has exceeded its target. What steps is TBS taking to close the gap overall, and how will departments be held accountable for meeting this target?
So the performance report for Treasury Board Secretariat in many cases is a roll-up of other departments' results, and that's just the role as a central agency. And the member has highlighted an area where the department's doing pretty well. There are others where there's clearly some work to do across the system. The way TBS would focus is where there is gaps and objectives not being met. We would work with the department around improvement plans, and they would then go forward and try and reach those. I will say there's a frustration in the system, including me, around performance reporting, because we have many programs in the government where there's just not sufficient data to report on whether the program is meeting its objectives. And that's one of the things that my colleagues and I with the minister would like to improve upon, is making sure you actually get the relevant data to measure the program, and then that you can truly go out and get it when it comes time to do an evaluation. So there's some homework for us to do on the results reporting.
Can we just drill down a little bit on that? How are you going to try to get the data you're looking for?
So the real place to do that is when a program comes in with its performance objectives and measures, to really push hard to say, how are you going to get this data? Can you get it? We have a very elaborate regime in many cases that has layers on it, but it turns out in some cases the data is not, they're not able to report on it the way they intended. And so you end up with an evaluation on program performance that is inconclusive. So when you get one of those evaluations, then that's a trigger to go back to the department and say, okay, rethink your performance metrics. And I'm probably making my friend Antoine squirm here, but he knows how I feel.
Would you like to add? Because we don't want you squirming too much.
No,
just a little.
I'm not squirming at all. Like I think, like as Bill mentioned, when we review, as Bill explained, like when we review proposal, before they come to Treasury Board, we set like ambitious goals. But it's always a challenge by setting ambitious goals to measure results, like to ensure that the departments like promotes like things that they can measure. And so we're we're pushing them hard to put like measures performance that can be measured.
How much time, Chair? Am I okay?
We've got a minute.
Okay. I know, I just want to drill down on one social policy matter. In my riding of Eglinton Lawrence, there are quite a few seniors who rely on the Canada Dental Care Plan. And just a few days ago, the Minister of Health announced that close to 6 million Canadians overall, or about 15% of the total population, use this plan. How will our new spending outlined outline. I thought I was getting heckled there. How how will the new spending outline build and expand the Canada Dental Care Plan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is funding in these supplementary estimates B for the dental plan, and that is largely because the take-up on that plan has been greater than initially forecast, and so the take-up's been terrific. Maybe there was a backlog of people waiting for these types of services, and that's why you've seen this initial wave, but there's additional funds in there for the plan to make sure that those who are eligible can receive the services that they're entitled to.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go start at the top of the order again with Mrs. Block. Go ahead, Mrs. Block, for 5.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. Matthews, and those sitting at the table with you, your responses to the questions that we as parliamentarians have for you. I'm looking at your website. It states that for the year 2024-25, the Government of Canada only met 53% of their department's mandated goals. What are the consequences, if any, when departments continue to fail or barely reach their goals? And this may follow up on Mr. Gasparo's questions. But when 53% of departments don't meet their, or when 47% of departments don't meet their mandated goals, what is the recourse of the Treasury Board Secretariat?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we are establishing goals for departments, or when they are establishing them with our help, we do want stretch goals because you do want to aim high. That number is low. I'm not entirely sure exactly which figure the member is looking at, but I know 2 that are on TBS's departmental results report that are kind of jump off the page. High volume service. The system as a whole is down around 52%. And also the number of IT systems that we would view as being healthy. Again, we're in, I believe below 50%. And those are 2 numbers where you have to dig in and find out why. With the health of IT, it's a question of resourcing and prioritizing the spend in IT. On the high volume services, you can't really be generic about it. You have to look at each one and say, okay, what's going on there? Was their take up bigger than we expected? Were they unable to hire staff? What's the background on this? So it really is a case-by-case basis. To answer the question, okay, what's the recourse? Treasury Board, with the Treasury Board Secretary, with the support or endorsement of Treasury Board, can put conditions around improvement on departments, or they could put additional reporting requirements on departments as a way to try and keep an eye on things. But it starts with, what's your plan to improve?
Ms. Block, before you continue, can you move your mic up a tiny bit? Bit more?
There we go.
Bit more?
A little more.
There we go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the Department of Citizenship and Immigration failed to meet 55.6% of their departmental targets in 2024-25. Now they're requesting an additional $624 million in funding through the supplementary estimates. Why is the Government of Canada rewarding departments with more funding when they fail to meet more than half of their departmental targets?
Thank you, Chair. And again, you have to really look into the detail of which targets are not being met and why. In some cases, the answer to meeting more of the targets is indeed resources. So it's not really an effective punishment to hold back resources if you've got a department that is not, in general, meeting its goals. So you have to really understand what is the reason. And I think more detailed questions about which ones are being met and which ones are not are probably more appropriate for the department in question. But I would just reiterate that the instinct to withhold resources for those departments who are not maybe doing as well as we would like may not be the right instinct.
Well, one could make a number of guesses as to what is going on in the Department of Citizenship and Immigration in not meeting their departmental targets. I'll move on. Regarding the operating expenditures for the interim federal health program, less than a week ago, the Standing Committee for Health called for the Auditor General to investigate this program amidst rising concerns over the ballooning costs. This year, an additional $598 million in funding will be added to the program through these estimates. So why is Treasury Board looking for approval to give a program $142 million more than last year when there is an audit pending for allegations of abuse within it?
So, certainly. So the request has been made for an audit, but obviously until there is an audit done and there's conclusions, they're not proven. The recipients of the funding in this envelope are entitled to it. There's a backlog of cases, and so there's other measures being looked at to possibly better control the growth in this area as well. And I've not spoken to the Auditor General about a planned audit yet.
Thanks very much. We'll go back to Mrs. Romanato, please, for 5.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you again to the witnesses. So this may sound like a bizarre question, but it's something I actually am quite interested in. For the expenditure cycle for the Government of Canada, what is the impact on it with respect to the changing of when we table our budget? So we made the decision to now do a fall budget so that it would allow provinces and territories, municipalities and so on to be able to do their planning as often, often they do their budgets in the spring, but they need to know what it is what's coming down the pike, really. So I'd like to know if it would be possible to elaborate a little bit on what that impact is in terms of the expenditure cycle for Treasury Board Secretary, but also what that would mean in terms of any additional changes that need to happen, if you'd like to elaborate a little.
Certainly. So the two main benefits for tabling in the fall are the one the member just mentioned, Mr. Chair, around giving provinces and territories more clarity about the federal government's plans while they develop their own budgets. And I've already spoken to a few provincial colleagues who are quite pleased with that. The second one is parliamentarians have often expressed frustration about lack of alignment between the budget when it's in the spring and the main estimates typically tabled around the same time that reflects nothing of the budget. Tabling the budget in the fall, as has been done this year and it will happen going forward, gives departments a chance to get budget measures into their main estimates, which Parliament will see in 2026 before April 1st, and allow better alignment there. Departments are going to have to work very hard to get their submissions for new funding into the main estimates, so that will be, excuse me, our job over the next few months with departments. And the other piece will be investments, but also reductions. So there's been some dialogue this morning or this afternoon around the CER and when will the details show up. The full details will be in the main estimates and the departmental plans that go with it when they are tabled in 2026. And the reductions we've been talking about, they don't actually take effect till April 1st. So that's where you will see the traditional parliamentary reporting with those details outside of PBO requests, et cetera, which has already been discussed.
So in that regard, with respect to those departmental results reports, would it then take us until an additional fiscal year before we're able to see those? Because if we're shifting that, I'm curious on when the reporting will be and the planning, just because we're kind of off cycle at the moment.
I actually think it works better, Mr. Chair. So the main estimates, the good companion piece is the departmental plans. So you get the high level, and the departmental plans will still go with those, and they should reflect the same things the main estimates reflect in terms of investments. And the departmental results reports, their companion piece is the public accounts of Canada, which they both happen in the fall, and they will continue to do so.
Now, in terms of some of the programs that you had talked about in terms of the CER, the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, when we do the review next year to see, how did we do in terms of, the cuts that were made or forecast and so on, is there a plan to do a sort of an updated training session for parliamentarians to understand a little bit more about the impact of these changes that we have, but also in terms of how to understand, because this is pretty new for parliamentarians in terms of the CER. Is there a plan in terms of providing parliamentarians a little bit more of an in-depth update on how this is working?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any plan for tailored briefings to parliamentarians in terms of the plans. I will say the format of the reporting that departments use in their departmental plans and their results will be standard across the board, so parliamentarians will have an easier time to digest. Obviously, committees are free to dig into those, and we are certainly open to receiving any requests through the minister and his office around additional training that might be needed.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
Madame Gaudreau, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to learn more. How does it work, essentially? Who gives you the order to succeed in presenting an expenditure budget based on requirements? Does it come essentially from the Prime Minister's cabinet? I will turn to my colleague Antoine to add to my answers in a short while. Decisions that are taken by the government to invest need to be approved by the Treasury Board. After that, they are included in the expenditure budget. Maybe Antoine has something to add. My question is, I couldn't obtain any answers from the minister. So I'm wondering, where does it start? Where does it go? We are looking for answers that we are not receiving. Can you explain the process? The main priorities, of course, are established in the speech to the throne, and then they trickle down to budget decisions that go through the Department of Finance, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister, as was explained. After that, when an expenditure is announced in the budget, it goes to the Treasury Board for approval, and then it's only after approval by the Treasury Board that the expenditure can get into the main budget estimates. When I read the budget, and I'd like to come back to investments, and this is something I like to discuss with people around me, particularly CPAs, who themselves do not understand how come all investments are in the same package. If we own a submarine or a plane or a building, the PBO said it was 4%. Well, I said those were not really investments. We are offering services.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We have two certified professional accountants on this table, myself and Annie. When we talk about accounting standards, that is not going to change. Public accounts will continue showing expenditure as always, and the assets and so on. What the government has done is present the budget using a different definition for investments. The objective was to show all the government is doing to increase investments in Canada.
Investment, but there's also other measures the government can take to attract investment into Canada, and they were trying to, or they are presenting those all together as a capital investment plan. That will not change the public accounts of Canada and how we actually report results.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est que on a décidé. So what I understand is that a decision was made. Well, the figures are good. We decided to play with the figures to present a certain picture. What are we expecting from the OAG if we are going to demystify real investments? Because I want to know what a tax credit is. And I understand because these are economic spin-offs. When we talk to people, they say, what is an investment? It's clearly not what we're saying in the budget. Am I the one who is mistaken? Please help me.
Monsieur le
Mr. Chair, There are no standards in presenting the budget. Each person does something differently. Each government, the government of Canada decided to present its budget using a different format this time around, simply to underscore the investments being made. Some people do not like it, others like it. Where we need to compare apples with apples. We can't compare what is happening in Quebec, because you own a hospital in Quebec, for example, and we're saying it's the same as in Quebec. No, it's not the same. And that's the choice we made with the figures we have. And the Auditor General will give us the results. Is that the situation?
Vivek.
The Auditor General will continue audits of public accounts, but not the budget. Thank you, Chair.
And then Mr. Gasparo.
Thank you. So, Mr. Matthews, since we were chatting earlier, I have a question for you specifically on the contract again, on the Stellantis contract. On Tuesday, the Department of Industry told us that no single lawyer reviewed the entire Stellantis contract. They specifically said, to my amazement, that legal isn't even present during negotiations. So they explained that only a few lawyers would have seen select parts of the contract. So if there's no single lawyer who's reviewed a contract of $15 billion, would it be responsible for the Minister of the Treasury Board to sign off on the spending?
So again, Mr. Chair, in terms of how the agreement and the deal was reached, I wasn't there. I can't really comment on that. I'll go back and listen to that testimony with great interest. Again, we are dealing with the parameters. So it's Cabinet makes decisions that establishes the parameters of a program or an initiative or a deal. And if the department's proposal to Treasury Board respects those parameters and respects Treasury Board policies, then the responsible minister is given the authority to go ahead.
Okay, so would you expect that lawyers would have combed through that humongous $15 billion contract with a fine-tooth comb to protect Canadian taxpayers before it came to you?
I would expect that the responsible departmental officials in Justice and I said, and maybe others, would have reviewed all relevant material, and I will go back and listen to that testimony with interest.
Okay, so earlier Minister Ali said that there's mechanisms to deal with people violating TBS guidelines. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Treasury Board policies and Treasury Board directives are mandatory, and there's a way for a department to seek an exemption if warranted, and Treasury Board can grant exemptions, or I can grant some. Where you've got departments who are not respecting Treasury Board policy, there are things Treasury Board can do. They could remove delegation for contracting authority or for HR authorities, etc. So it effectively would be, the most common one would be additional reporting or an improvement plan. If it's too severe, then you would actually see pulling back of contracting authority.
Okay, so would you consider not having at least one lawyer look through the entire contract? Like I say, I was absolutely stunned when they said they don't have legal during negotiations. And then on top of it to say, well, no one single lawyer actually sat through the entire, they were parsed out pieces of the contract. Like, would that have broken the rules? That seems to me like very unusual for a $15 billion contract.
So I can't speak to what happened in this case. The normal case when I was in line departments, when you're reviewing a major agreement or deal, is you would get legal advice as part of that, and they would sign off on this. I cannot speak to the detailed process that the department followed.
So you are saying it would be the norm that Treasury Board would expect that there would be proper lawyer oversight before it comes to you for signing? There would,
before a department reaches a deal, there would be legal risk analysis and a sign-off of some sort. You're not going to find that in a Treasury Board policy. That's just my own expectation, and it's my experience as well.
And you know what? Honestly, I would expect that as just a regular Canadian taxpayer that you would have proper legal oversight. So it just kind of blew my mind when they mentioned that.
Well, as I said, Mr. Chair, I will go back and read that testimony. So I'm
yeah. So that was Stephanie Tanton that said that. She was very clear at the Tuesday meeting. So. the job of the Treasury Board, you're there to ensure that things like there's provisions to protect the Canadian jobs in the agreement. Is that correct?
Again, it would be the parameters of if there's a program involved, which is a series of agreements, there would be parameters in the program that they would need to respect. My recollection of the Stellantis is that it's not a particular program, it's a one-off agreement. The parameters of that would have been approved by, not by, like the broad parameters, not approved by Treasury Board, they would have been negotiated by the department.
So you would have nothing to do of ensuring that there were job guarantees in that. Whose job would it be to ensure there were job guarantees in order for that? Because I know, like from what I understand, the Treasury Board is this that has to make sure spending is justified, risks are understood, the department has done its homework, and taxpayers are getting what they pay for. So whose job is it to make sure there are job guarantees or clawbacks if things don't happen, or like in the case of Stellantis, they leave?
So
Very brief answer, please.
Sure, certainly, Mr. Chair. The department would be responsible for making sure that they had enough protection to respect the government's decision in terms of whatever guarantees were established when it was approved.
Ms. Rochefort, please.
We thank you very much, Mr. Chair. But I was pleased to read in the departmental results that the Secretariat, the Treasury Board Secretariat, had identified $9.6 million in spending reductions in 2024-2025. And I think it was listed that you had, there was reductions in operations, professional services, transfer payments, travel, and so on. But I was just wondering in terms of how that affected your obligations to deliver on priorities or any significant projects that you might have had.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will turn to my Chief Financial Officer in a moment to just elaborate for a bit. But TBS is a very human-centric organization, so we are very, very heavy on people. We are not delivering programs directly to Canadians. So where we typically look for savings is just making sure we are looking at the areas of highest risk and consolidating where we can in terms of functions, and taking a look at some things that maybe we used to do in the past that we no longer are value added. I don't know if you wish to add anything, Annie?
Yes, thank you for the question. There is I don't have the reference to the 9 million savings reduction, but I know there's a 15 million reduction in our spending because there was a transfer of the Canadian Digital Service to Employment program was transferred to the Employment and Social Development Canada. So there's a reduction in our spending due to a transfer of program to another department.
Well, just on that note, I'm equally interested in knowing how AI is improving the services of the Treasury Board.
AI is one of the interesting pieces that we are looking at throughout government, and there's, every department is doing some mini experimentation with artificial intelligence. At TBS, it's very helpful for us in terms of, reviewing and processing. We have analysts experimenting with, using it to edit memos, etc. I think it's too early to say, point to me exactly what the productivity gains have been. If you talk to colleagues in the private sector, would tell you they're experiencing the exact same thing. We're all experimenting and all trying to figure out where the true production or productivity savings are. And so more to come on that in the future, I think.
Just to come back to briefly to a comment that was made by the minister, I'd like to understand just how involved you are, for example, in the purchase of fighter jets.
So it's national defense, Public Service Procurement Canada, and the new Defense Investment Agency, which is relatively new, who would be involved in that, along with partners from the Department of Industry, ISED. Treasury Board would have a role in terms of approvals for contracts, project authorities, getting regular status updates. So this project has been underway for a while. Where the department might be seeking additional money or a change in plans, they may have to come to Treasury Board, but Defence has pretty broad authorities with PSPC to manage on a day-to-day basis.
Very good. And maybe just a final comment on the environmental footprint. Did you see through your departmental results, are there any comments on the reduction in the government's environmental footprint?
So Treasury Board Secretariat, Mr. Chair, has something called the Greening Government program or organization. It's a small group that is very much focused on reducing emissions from government operations, so inside government. The two to highlight are we are now at 83% of our light-duty vehicles are now green, so that's great. And then if you look at emissions from government buildings comparing 2025 to previous years, we're down 42%, I believe, over the last 20 years or so, so making good progress. So we're on track. The eventual goal there is net zero, obviously, so still a ways to go.
Ollie here always says, thank you for your service, but thank you for those results. So that's very impressive. So good work. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to Mrs. Block for 5, and then Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Matthews, according to the TPS website, GC Infobase, in 2024-25, Public Safety Canada set a total of 28 goals, and 14 of them are sitting at 0%. This is a department where 98% of the executives received bonuses in 23-24 when they met only 35.7% of their goals. The department is requesting an additional $43 million in supplementary spending in these estimates. And I guess my question for you is, given the Treasury Board sets the policy framework for how bonuses are awarded, what do you have to say when 98% of executives receive bonuses within a department when they haven't even met half of their stated goals?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, you would have to look at which goals are not being met and why. So if there are goals that are not being met because the required approvals weren't taken, et cetera, or something was delayed, you have to really dig in and determine what the cause is. In terms of those results and how we are monitoring at TBS, we are launching a new risk and compliance framework that will help us better assess how departments are doing in terms of where they are carrying risk, and some of those risks could be around delivery. In terms of Treasury Board Secretariat involvement in the awarding of performance pay to executives, that is up to the department's deputy head to make those determinations in terms of whether their executives are meeting what was asked of them or not. And so we don't have line of sight into those decisions. That is a deputy head decision.
But the Treasury Board is responsible for setting the policy framework. When you see incidents like this, where a department is not meeting even half of the goals they set, regardless of what the excuses or reasons may be, has the Treasury Board had a conversation in regards to reforming how bonuses are rewarded?
So regarding performance pay and linked to departments achieving their published targets or results, I have not had any of those conversations. I can tell you, in terms of the approach we take at TBS for our own employees, we are looking at whether the executives met the expectations in their own performance agreement. Some are tied to delivering on certain programs, and some are not. Some are more corporate related. So you really have to understand why the targets are not being met, and then the link to the executives before passing any judgment, I think, on whether there's a bigger problem.
Thank you very much, Chair. That is all that I have for today.
Thanks. Madame Gaudreau.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je vais juste compléter. Thank you, Chair. Let's talk about the contracts again. It's here that we have to look into contracts. You experienced that nightmare, Mr. Chair, and I'm really concerned. A while ago, I put the question to the minister. There's a salary increase, and there's a collective agreement, and 16,000 positions will be cut by attrition, and so on and so forth. Where is it stated here that contracts will be reduced and that work will be provided taking into account the competency levels of the public servants that will remain. Where do we find that information? Because I'm really concerned because it looks like this is a fiasco. It's in the budget that the government stated that there's a plan to reduce expenditure when it comes to contracts by 20%. But that does not concern all services. We use contracts to fill some positions in services like construction and so on. So there's a difference.
Work on that. There's some really good disclosure around government spending on contracts and what it's for in the public accounts. In terms of the balance between the public service and contracting and reductions, number one, all public servants are created equal. So where we have cases where we can do the work with public servants rather than with contractors, we should be doing with public servants every single time. But there are skill sets we do not have in the public service that we need outside help, construction, etc., and that's fine as well. So I think you'll see in departments' plans, main estimates, etc., and their departmental plans where they plan to spend money and where the reductions will be by skill set. The one that's worth highlighting is we did put in a special regime for experts in the digital domain that basically, through our chief information officer, departments are forced to kind of look at the digital talent we have inside the government before they go outside. So that's one specific thing we've done, but where we can do the work with public servants, that will obviously be the priority.
Monsieur le Président, on aura une vigie à faire, puis j'ai l'impression...
Mr. Chair, I don't want to experience another nightmare because when we talk about digital, I get concerned once again. Thank you. I think I'll stop there. I'm sure you yourselves have difficulty going to sleep.
Madame Gaudreau, I think we all wish to avoid another digital nightmare. Colleagues, if you don't mind, I just have a couple of quick questions for you, Mr. Matthews, and a couple of maybe just for an answer and a couple maybe take away with you. I'm glad Mrs. Block brought up the issue about the bonuses and the lack of, I guess, alignment with what's achieved. And I'm glad it's brought up because I've brought it up in public accounts, probably many different ministers and many different department heads, and the excuse is always, or the answer is always, well, we follow Treasury Board guidelines. And I'm sure I can, if you wish, I can go through all the blues from the many times we brought it up, but they always blame Treasury Board. Yes, we failed massively, but we're only following Treasury Board guidelines. So I think the onus seems to be placed on the guidelines. You mentioned about not passing judgment. I think when 98% of executives and management are getting bonuses when results are failing, I think it was, according to GC Infobase, 47% of the results were not achieved. Previous year was, from memory, close to 50. Previous year, 53%. So we have this massive failure, and departments are always saying, well, we're just following the rules. So I'll put that back with you. I just want to follow up. I'm glad you talked about departmental plans. I noticed, and when you look at the departmental results, fully 19% of last year's departmental results didn't have or had no results available. And then, and I brought this up, and I know you're probably laughing aside because we bring this up every year for the last several years, or to be achieved in the future. And of course, the estimates are based on a one-year achievement. I'm hoping that you will actually stop that procedure or practice in the departments where they're actually presenting departmental plans to Parliament, but without actual goals attached. So I do appreciate that. The stretch goals, I wonder if you could get back to us. I know you mentioned, okay, departments are mission because of stretch goals. We actually go through and look, and a fair amount of where they've missed the results, they've actually dropped less than last year. And if you look at the departmental plans, I'd be happily bet money more than 50% of the goals for next year are actually below what they actually achieved the previous year. So I don't think it's because they have stretch goals when most of them are actually showing lower, their goals are to actually achieve less than they have previous years. and the previous year before that. So I'll just leave that with you. I do have a quick question. I want to follow up with Mr. Kelly, who's left the room, about the PBO and the CER. Like, the PBO wrote to the 5 departments asking for the information. He didn't write to Treasury Board. He wrote to the 5 ministers. But the Comptroller General responded. Like, who directed her not to provide the information to the PBO? And I am going to see, like, it was October 30th we asked the minister, and he said yes. I know October 31st, the cabinet was briefed by the Comptroller General and others on the CER, but still not released. Some, like, who would have directed her to refuse to hand over the data to the PBO that's required under the Parliament of Canada Act?
So a couple of points in there, Mr. Chair. One, the decision for the Comptroller General to write to the PBO and say, we're unable to respond right now. It was not a no, it was we can't respond within this deadline. And there was no consultation on the deadline. It was just, and so that decision was taken between myself, the Comptroller General, and colleagues at the Department of Finance. And it was just felt, because all 5 were in the same boat, that just one response would be a useful thing to say.
Okay, October 31st, when the Comptroller General briefed the Cabinet Committee on this, you're saying she briefed him with incomplete numbers?
The Comptroller General would not have briefed Cabinet Committee on.
So you're saying Comptroller General did not brief anyone on this?
On the CER?
Yes.
The Comptroller General would not have been briefing on the CER. No, she will now be monitoring results. But the decision was around, we know all 5 aren't in a position to respond, so we just thought one response is better. This was not a no, we will not respond. It's we can't respond in this timeline. So the 5 departments in question are all working to respond as quickly as they can, and those responses to the PBO, to the request, will come from the departments on behalf of their minister, not from TBS.
Okay. So I appreciate that. So the decision made by yourself and finance, but not by the departments themselves. When the PBO wrote to the departments, no offense, not to you, not to finance, but to the departments.
That's fair, Mr. Chair. There was dialogue between Treasury Board Secretariat and departments about this. It was not just written out of the blue without consulting departments. They were not in a position to respond.
Okay. I think we will agree to disagree, and we hope that we will see the document or the information very soon. I do echo Mr. Kelly's comments. It's bizarre to ask us to vote on a budget on the cuts when the cuts aren't, the information is not shared with us, and then to sit and say, well, we have to inform others what the cuts will be after Parliament, uninformed. This is what the cuts. But I appreciate your feedback. I'm glad you were able to join us today. Mr. Matthews has been with us so much. I think he's reached OGO Super Elite status, so you get a complimentary upgrade on your next visit with us. Anyways, thanks very much for being with us. Colleagues, I have a couple of quick announcements just to update everyone. December 2nd, we had set aside for our meeting with Mr. Guzman and Secretary Fuhr. Unfortunately, they have stated it was for a 2-hour meeting. They have stated they will not honor our motion, and they are refusing to meet separately. They will only appear together for 1 hour. I'm not asking for a decision or anything from the committee yet, but we'll bring it up at the next meeting. We've given them several alternatives, but they will not appear separately and will only appear for 1 hour. You saw the note, December 11th is Canada Post now. We do apologize. I think we said repeatedly it's the 4th, but it is December 11th, so I appreciate everyone's patience with that. December 4th, we will have in person for 1 hour the representative from Stellantis. The second hour we had made available, we had invited the Minister for PSPC. We made several dates available, and unfortunately the Minister will not make himself available to defend his estimates. December 4th, we're looking at the second hour being PSPC officials. So I'll leave that with everyone, and we can take up the issue of the motion calling for 2 hours, separate hours for Mr. Guzman and the Minister, and then how we wish to follow up with the Minister for PSPC at our next meeting. Again, witnesses, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate the information and the feedback you provided. Colleagues, thanks very much for the patience as we play around with our schedule. We are adjourned.